At 8 p.m. on February 9th, 1964, a record 74 million people turned into the Ed Sullivan Show to watch four guys with dorky haircuts sing a couple songs. They were from Liverpool, England. John, Paul, George, Ringo. Why does Ringo always get last, He's the drummer, okay. He's back behind everybody. The Beatles made their American debut. Now, they already had some notoriety in England, but this appearance caused their fame to explode in America. Beatlemania began. It would seem they were overnight successes, but they were not. John and Paul began playing together in a band in 1957. They played some coffee shops in Liverpool. In a couple years, they were in Frankfurt, Germany, playing in some pretty sketchy joints. They returned to England, got a minor record deal and some airplay, and their fan base began to grow. They signed a new agent who got them on the Ed Sullivan Show, and then things went crazy. They were not the exception to the rule. If you noticed, most overnight successes take a long time. The purposes of God often develop slowly because his grand designs are never hurried. That great New England preacher Phillips Brooks was noted for his poise and his quiet manner. At times, however, even he suffered moments of frustration and irritability. One day a friend saw him feverishly pacing the floor like a caged lion. He said, "What's the trouble, Mr. Brooks?" "The trouble is that I'm in a hurry and God isn't." Haven't we felt that way many times? Well, that's where we left Joseph a couple weeks ago. So far, it's been a story of pain and disappointments. Harassed by his brothers, dumped in a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown in prison. Boy, he's got it made, hadn't he? He interpreted Pharaoh's cupbearers and bakers' dreams. The outcomes came true. The bakers executed. The cupbearers restored to his position, and then promptly forgets Joseph. James Joyce wrote a 4-act play entitled A Long Day's Journey into Night in 1939. It was first performed in 1956. It's a depressing play about a dysfunctional family. And if you ever took much of an English class, you had to read it, and it's a depressing play. Hated it. The title is symbolic of the play. With that long day representing life, that long day's journey, that's life, and into night, that represents death. And in the play, you watch the family just die out. One of the characters dies, the family falls apart, it's terrible. Joseph's story is the opposite. We have been seeing disaster after disaster, false hope after false hope. He has not really caught a break. It has been night in the life of Joseph. Even the good things that have happened while he was a slave or a prisoner. But this long night is about to turn into day for Joseph. The day started like any other for him. Same routine, no hope for change. But unknown to him, God is doing something. Let's look at chapter 41 in Genesis, beginning at verse 1. 2 full years later, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing on the bank of the Nile River. In his dream, he saw 7 fat, healthy cows come up out of the river and begin grazing in the marsh grass. And then he saw 7 more cows come up from behind them from the Nile, but these were scrawny and thin. These cows stood beside the fat cows on the riverbank, and then the scrawny, thin cows ate the 7 healthy, fat cows. At this point in the dream, Pharaoh woke up, as most of us would have at that point, huh? But he fell asleep again and had a second dream, and this time he saw 7 heads of grain, plump and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. And then 7 more heads of grain appeared, but these were shriveled and withered by the east wind, and these thin heads swallowed up the 7 plump, well-formed heads. And then Pharaoh woke up again and realized it was a dream. The next morning, Pharaoh was very disturbed by the dreams, so he called for all the magicians and the wise men of Egypt. And when Pharaoh told them his dreams, not one of them could tell him what they meant. Pharaoh's bothered by his dreams. I think the whole cow thing would have been enough to bother most of us, right? Let alone the grain stuff. Cannibalizing cows, it seems like a disturbing thing or a bad pizza from the night before. So he calls for his magicians. Now, that's not sorcerers or wizards like we think of magicians. Those were the men that were educated, they were well-read, they were knowledgeable men, they knew history, mathematics, philosophy, languages, astronomy. But despite all their learning, they cannot tell him what his dream means. Verse 9. Finally, the king's chief cupbearer spoke up. Today I have been reminded of my failure, he told Pharaoh. Some time ago you were angry with the chief baker and me, and you imprisoned us in the palace of the captain of the guard. One night, the chief baker and I each had a dream, and each dream had its own meaning. There was a young Hebrew man with us in the prison who was a slave of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he told us what each of our dreams meant. And everything happened just as he had predicted. I was restored to my position as cupbearer, and the chief baker was executed and impaled on a pole. Pharaoh sent for Joseph at once, and he was quickly brought from the prison. After he shaved and changed his clothes, he went in and stood before Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream last night, and no one here can tell me what it means, but I have heard that when you hear about a dream, you can interpret it. I love that word, finally. Finally, the king's cupbearer spoke up. Finally, he's standing there listening to this whole discussion, right? And finally, he says something. Or in Joseph's case, finally, after 2 years, he says something. The fact that the cupbearer was around for that conversation tells us how close he was to Pharaoh. Sir, I know a guy. He might be able to help. Go get the man. Now, some writers made a big deal about the fact that Joseph cleaned up, and it's definitely a God-inspired detail because it's there. Some want to give Joseph credit for being so wise to do so. I'm not sure a prisoner has that much choice. I think a warden knows that if he's sending someone to Pharaoh, he needs to clean up the filthy wretch first, because those prisons were not clean. Or maybe the cupbearer says, make sure you clean him up before you send him in. Egyptians were clean-shaven. Show up clean, right? So for some of these people, it's like, okay, so it's a good idea to clean up before a job interview. I hope that's not the point that you get out of this story. It's not really the point. It's not why God put it in the biblical account. He shows up. Pharaoh says, so I hear you're the guy. Now, this was Joseph's moment to shine, right? But look at his response. It's one of integrity and humility. He didn't go, yep, that's me. He says, that's beyond my power to do so. But God can tell you what it means and set you at ease. You know why Joseph could be so humble and speak so openly? Because his heart had been broken. Because he had been tried by the fire of affliction. Because while his external circumstances seemed almost unbearable during those years, his internal condition had been turned into gold. We are now witnessing the benefits of enduring affliction with one's eyes on God. Now, throughout the rest of Joseph's life, from age 30 to 110 when he died, we're not going to hear one word of resentment come from his lips. Not a word of blame against his brothers, the ones that sold him into slavery, not a word of bitterness against Potiphar's wife, no word of rebuke against the cupbearer who had forgotten him. Joseph was eventually in a position to get even with all of them. But he didn't. We'll look more at that in the coming weeks. So in verses 17 through 24, Pharaoh tells him the dreams, which we've already read. Verse 25, Joseph responded. Both of Pharaoh's dreams mean the same thing. God is telling Pharaoh in advance what he is to do, what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 healthy heads of grain represent 7 years of prosperity. The 7 thin, scrawny cows that come up later and the 7 thin heads of grain withered by the east wind represent 7 years of famine. This will happen just as I have described it, for God has revealed to Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The next 7 years will be a period of great prosperity throughout the land of Egypt. But afterward, there will be 7 years of famine so great that all the prosperity will be forgotten in Egypt. Famine will destroy the land. This famine will be so severe that even the memory of the good years will be erased. As for having two similar dreams, it means that these events have been decreed by God, and he will soon make them happen. Joseph is still giving God the credit. And then he tells what the dreams mean. Notice he puts God in the lead when he begins to tell Pharaoh what the dreams mean. But then Joseph goes on, verse 33. Therefore, Pharaoh should find an intelligent and wise man and put him in charge of the entire land of Egypt. And then Pharaoh should appoint supervisors over the land and let them collect 1/5 of all the crops during the 7 good years. Have them gather all the food produced in the good years that are just ahead and bring it to Pharaoh's storehouses. Store it away and guard it so there'll be food in the cities. That way there will be enough to eat when the 7 years of famine come to the land of Egypt. Otherwise, this famine will destroy the land. That's awesome. Joseph is so gutsy, so confident that God gave him the meaning of the dreams that he gives Pharaoh some counsel. A slave, a prisoner, even though he's freshly shaven, giving Pharaoh advice. I think God has a great sense of irony. Joseph gives Pharaoh a game plan, but look, not once did he say, well, I could do that for you if you want. Or, I'd like to have that job. After all, I did interpret your dreams, and I think I kind of deserve it. He wasn't that. You remember Welcome Back, Potter? You remember, what was the one guy, Horshack? Oh. You know, he's not over in the corner doing that as Pharaoh and his leaders discuss. 37. Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials. So Pharaoh asked his officials, can we find anyone else like this man, so obviously filled with the Spirit of God? And then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are. You will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than yours. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt. And then Pharaoh removed a signet ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in fine linen clothing and hung a gold chain around his neck. And then he had Joseph ride in the chariot reserved for his second in command. And wherever Joseph went, the command was shouted, kneel down. So Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of all Egypt. And Pharaoh said to him, I am Pharaoh, but no one will lift a hand or a foot in the entire land of Egypt without your approval. And then Pharaoh gave Joseph a new Egyptian name, Zaphenath-Paneah. He also gave him a wife whose name was Asenath. She was the daughter of Potiphera, the priest of On. Then Joseph took charge of the entire land of Egypt. He was 30 years old when he began serving in the court of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And when Joseph left Pharaoh's presence, he inspected the entire land of Egypt. Pharaoh didn't cut Joseph off. He didn't say, hold it. I'll ask your opinion when I want it. He says, I like it. In fact, we all like it. In fact, we need a guy just like this guy to do the job. Say, that gives me an idea. Why? Because he and his officials recognize, just like Potiphar had, just like the prison ward had, that God's hand was on Joseph. They recognized his character. They recognized that God has given him discernment, which is the ability to have shrewd insight into a situation and to act constructively in times of need. The ability to know what the right course of action is in a difficult situation. They saw the qualities that God had been building into his life all this time. And so Pharaoh gave Joseph his signet ring. That's like the platinum charge card of the day. No limit. It was the way the king stamped invoices, the laws, or anything else he wanted to verify or validate with his seal. Now Joseph had it. He gave him new clothes, a chariot. It's like Cinderella. A couple of hours before, he's a scruffy, bearded prisoner. I was thinking about sleeping. Like like the prison wouldn't be comfortable, right? Maybe there was some straw on a rock or something. I don't know. And he wakes up that morning, gets the sore spots out, and that night he goes to bed in a nice bedroom. The Hilton Honors of whatever city they were in. Got new clothes, new bling, a new ride. And everywhere he goes, people are supposed to bow down to him. Can you imagine Joseph's mind that day? Like this is different, He's been the lowest of the low. Now he's one step away from the highest of the high. It's incredible. But when God determines that the time is right, that's the way God operates. So what does that mean for us? I'm going to spend a little more time on our application today. The first thing I think it means is don't quit. No matter how hard your situation is, no matter how forgotten you feel, God is at work. John Piper says, God is always doing 10,000 things in your life, and at any given time, you may be aware of 3 of them. This is where your faith in God is put to the test. And you need to hang on with all your might. We don't mind following God when things are going our way, when things are easy, when the sun is shining, when he seems to be listening to us, following our plan. But when things aren't easy, our selfish human nature starts to complain. We even get angry with him because we think we deserve better. But, and this is important, if we are Christians, we have given our lives to him. Jeremiah understood this. He wrote in Jeremiah 10:23, I know, Lord, that our lives are not our own. We are not able to plan our own course. Our lives are God's to do as he pleases, to use as he sees fit to further his purposes. And we need to remember that. There's some that tell you, we've talked about it before, there's some out there that are preaching and telling you that God's purpose is to make you happy. I am sorry, that is a lie from the pit of hell. Because you are not the center of the universe. God is. They got that backwards. Our purpose is to make God happy, is to honor God. And if you look at the world, that doesn't mean that Christians are all prosperous and have easy lives. It'd be great if it was. It'd certainly be easier to convince people to become a Christian, wouldn't it? But you don't have to read very far into the book of Acts to go, well, that doesn't seem to work out. By the time you get to chapter 4, Peter's in jail. Shut up. Stop talking about Jesus. You keep reading, it doesn't take you too many more chapters to go, oh, they beheaded James. Well, that stinks. And it goes on. And Paul is beaten and shipwrecked and whipped and eventually martyred. If God's purpose was to make people happy, he's doing a lousy job. And if you think his purpose is to make you happy, you are misconstrued, my friend. I have to tell you, this week as I thought about this passage, I'm like, oh God, do not make me preach this part. Because so often in my life, it seems like I preach a sermon and then I got to go through it. I'm like, no, I don't want to talk about it. I'm hoping all the times before when I've gone through this count, and I don't have to like next week go, okay, let me tell you what happened this week at our house. I've told you this before. My first year seminary, I was sick as a dog. And no doctor seemed terribly interested in getting me better. At one point in time, I'd lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks, and I thought, I'm going to die and nobody cares? And why would you call me to seminary? Why would you put me through all the things I've gone through to surrender to you, to the ministry, so that you could bring me to seminary and kill me? And that was the week I read that verse. I know, Lord, that our lives are not our own. We are not able to plan our own course. And I came to the point in my Christian walk, which I think was essential, where I had to say, God, if that's what you want out of me, if my death from some illness, before I even get started in ministry, professional ministry, if that furthers your purpose, then so be it. Then my life is in your hands, and that's what it'll be. I think that's probably where my attitude should have been long before then. But God allowed me to go through that dark time to come to that point. And I see this in Joseph's life. I tell you, we don't like going through pain, and that's normal. But so often what we want is out. Let me out of this. Or we get mad at God and go, well, if this is the way you're going to treat me, you don't deserve my allegiance. And we quit. Do not quit. We have to be like Joseph, and we need to submit to what God is doing, whether we understand it or not, whether we like it or not. I'm reminded of another man in Scripture. I think he even had it worse than Joseph. Dear old Job got beat up by calamity, the death of 10 children, the destruction of his home, the loss of everything he owned, the loss of his health. He didn't even have the comfort of caring friends. He had nothing. And I don't think anybody would blame him for saying what he says in Job 23. Let's look at that passage. Then Job spoke again. My complaint today is still a bitter one, and I try hard not to groan aloud. If only I knew where to find God, I would go to his court. I would lay out my case and present my arguments, and then I would listen to his reply and understand what he says to me. Would he use his great power to argue with me? No, he would give me a fair hearing. Honest people can reason with him, so I would be forever acquitted by my judge. I go east, but he's not there. I go west, but I cannot find him. I do not see him in the north, for he is hidden. I look to the south, but he is concealed. Job is saying, I wish I could find God. I just want to sit down and I want to talk with him about my situation. I want to ask him, why am I going through this? I want my why questions asked, and I want my how long problem solved. And despite everything he's gone through, Job still believes that God will listen to him. He would give me a fair hearing. But still, Job questions why. What's he doing? I don't know. Where is he? I can't find him. What he sees, I can't see. I love this. He says, but I know this. I know this. I love this part. Verse 10, but he knows where I am going. And when he tests me, I will come out as pure gold. For I have stayed on God's paths. I have followed his ways and not turned aside. I have not departed from his commands, but have treasured his words more than daily bread. When he tests me, or when he has tried me, some versions say, is the key phrase. You see, there's no hurry-up process for finding and shaping gold. The process of discovering, processing, purifying, and shaping gold is a lengthy, painstaking process. Affliction is gold in the making for the child of God. And God is the one who determines how long that process takes. He alone is the refiner. Job wasn't saying, well, when he's tested me, I'll make millions. Or when he's tested me, then I'll get back everything I lost. It's not the externals that are promised, but the internals. The Lord promised Job, when the process is finished, you'll come forth as gold. Then you'll be ready to serve me where I choose. Then you'll be able to handle whatever promotion comes your way. That's where Joseph was. He had been in process. His gold was being refined. And now he was ready. Night was over and the day was waking. The second thing it means for us is that we need to trust God's timing. During the waiting, trust God without panic. Count on Him to handle the cupbearers of your life, the people who forget you, the people who break their promises. It's God's job to deal with them. It's your job to be the kind of servant that He has designed you to be. Be faithful during the waiting periods of life. God will not forget you or forsake you. Panic will make you impatient, and you'll try to do things your way instead of God's. I'm going to solve this problem. I'll just get a new job. I solve this problem. I'm moving to a new town. I'll solve this problem. I'll get a new wife. I'll solve this problem. I'll do whatever it is. Joseph had been faithful to God, and so he demonstrated his faithfulness to others. In the middle of his situation, he entered slavery into Potiphar's house. Slavery stinks. And Joseph was so faithful and diligent that he was given more responsibility, and by the time he left, he was in charge of everything Potiphar owned. It was no different in prison. Joseph was faithful and trustworthy, and the warden eventually gives Joseph major responsibility. Joseph shows us what faithfulness looks like behind the scenes. When the job's small and dirty and nobody's looking. And he's developed into the kind of man who will show faithfulness in the place of great and wide influence. Psalms 105:19 says, "Until the time came to fulfill his dreams, the Lord tested Joseph's character." That's the summary of Joseph so far. And when it says fulfill his dreams, it's not dreams like we're saying the American dream, you know. He had dreams of being important. He had dreams. No, he had a dream. Remember, it started the whole deal. I had this dream. And I think God was telling me, I'm going to be in charge of all you guys. Whose dream came true? It's happening. He might not have been wise in how he started earlier. God had spoken to him. God's making it happen now, but there is 13 years between those times or more. And when he shared that dream, he was in no position, nowhere ready to be that guy. And now he's had 13 years of night to get ready. And when it was time, God fulfilled that dream. God does some deep work in Joseph's heart and mind and life for about 13 years of affliction and waiting. If Joseph had been freed 2 years earlier when the cupbearer was let go and remembered, he probably leaves Egypt. He's out of there. I'm home, man. Or somewhere, maybe not home. Depends on where the brothers were at, maybe. But he's not around for the critical moment. So if we look at Joseph, from Joseph's perspective, well, that stinks. I've been forgotten for 2 years. No. God knew exactly when he was going to free you, and he knew exactly when he was going to need you to do what he called you to do. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. So I think another takeaway for us is when we look back over our lives and we look at this and think, well, if I had done this, or if this had happened, or I'd done this, or things would have been different, then it would be down. It's pointless. Don't do that. Trust that God knew what he was doing all along. And despite your mistakes, despite your sin, despite whatever happened to you, God knew what he was going to do with your life, and he's working in your life. Finally, when the reward comes, give God the credit. Thank God without pride. Only God can bring you through and out of the dungeon. Only God can reward you for your faithfulness. If he has, be grateful, not proud. There'll always be some who find a reason to say that you're not deserving, you're not qualified for reward or promotion or whatever. But you remember with humility that it's God who put you there. Can you imagine? We talked about imagining from Joseph's perspective. Can you imagine standing on the street and the chariot comes down, everybody says, kneel! And you're like, who's that? Well, that's that prisoner dude. What? Well, I've never been in jail. I should have been second in command, you know. That's how we are, right? Don't worry about those people. God's the one that's put you where you're at. So be grateful to God. We know that Joseph continues to give God credit and honor him. During the years of plenty, before the first famine hits, Joseph and his wife have 2 sons. Look at verse 50. During this time, before the first of the famine years, 2 sons were born to Joseph and his wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On. Joseph named his older son Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family. And Joseph named his second son Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief. Notice, first of all, that he gave him Hebrew names. He didn't acquiesce to the culture. He didn't like, well, I guess I'm an Egyptian now and I'll worship their gods. He's still Joseph, still following God. He's not forgotten his upbringing. The firstborn names Manasseh, which means made me forget. Now, God's not given him amnesia, but he's replaced his despair with joy and reasons to rejoice. And the second one he names Ephraim, which means God has made me fruitful. That can be translated double blessed, not just because God's given him 2 sons, but God has blessed his life and he's walking in God's will, experiencing the blessings of doing so. Some of you are on the edge of promotion. You don't even know it because God doesn't announce his appointments early. What you have to do while you wait is to believe his promises. When you're in the darkness of your dungeon, by faith, trust him to bring the light of a new day. We're going to close today. We're going to sing Waymaker. We've sung this song a lot lately, but I got to tell you, as I thought through this sermon today, this song fit. The bridge especially, even when I don't see it, you're working. I think all of us could say there's been times I look back and I didn't think God was working. And you know what? I look back today and I go, wow, his fingerprints were all over that and he was working. So let's close today. Let's let this be a song of praise. A song of commitment from us that even when things don't look like they're happening, we're going to continue on. I thought about our church. 1974, I don't know all the history of the church. There have been times it's been bigger. There's been times it's been smaller. We're still here. Waukees growing around us. There's a reason that we're here. We may not totally know it. I mean, we know we're supposed to reach people for Christ and all that. We may not know why, but we're here. It can be discouraging. You know, COVID is a booger. People get used to watching it from home. Sometimes we get people, I don't know if they're still coming to church or not, but then they watch online, and there's so many churches, we don't even know what church, you know, from that standpoint, what church is anymore. How many people you got coming? I don't know. We got some locals that don't come, but we got some friends in Africa that watch every Sunday. We got some friends in California that watch. We got some friends in Florida that watch. We got a guy in Maine that watches sometimes. Sometimes people from South Dakota watch. We have people in Tennessee that watch, so I don't know what our church is. In November, Chad Mize, who we saw a few weeks ago in Poland, is coming. He's a friend of mine. He's on staff at the church that we were members at in Tennessee. He's the pastor of community outreach and missions. He did my dad's funeral, and we've gotten to be close over the last couple of years. He has such a heart to reach in the community. He's going to come the first weekend of November, and we're calling it a weekend of discovery because It's not a retreat, and it's not a conference or whatever, but it's a weekend that we're going to spend together. And we're going to talk and look and see how God wants us to reach out into our community, because God has kept us here. Dave gave us kind of a theme for it. Why here? Why now? There have been times before COVID that I preached to 11 people on Sunday morning. You know, you look around today, we got folks that are sick, folks that are traveling. It's not the biggest attendance we've had even in the last month. We're still here. God has not forgotten us. We're going to be faithful as we follow God. I'm not saying after that conference we're going to boom and Hope Lutheran will be like, oh, I don't know, there's that mega church on the corner over there in Milwaukee. What are we going to do? Don't care about that stuff. We just want to do what God wants us to do. And He's kept us here. And I think we're going to see better days ahead for us. Not that today's bad. I'm probably not saying all this right. God has not forgotten us. We want to be like Joseph. We want to be faithful now. And may God open doors for ministry so that people come to know Him, and we get to disciple people, we get to baptize people, we get to raise them in the faith, we get to see families centered around Jesus being healthy, that God would use us in our community. I pray the same thing for us as individuals. So let this song be our statement of faith that God is working. Let's pray.